The Kansas sky stretched endlessly, a pale blue canvas fading into a warm amber glow as the late afternoon sun dipped lower toward the horizon. It was harvest season, the most critical time of the year, and every second counted. But in the middle of that vast farmland, time had stopped. A massive combine harvester, one of the most advanced machines money could buy, stood frozen like a stranded giant. Its enormous tires, each taller than a grown man, were buried halfway into thick, stubborn mud. What should have been firm soil had turned into a deceptive trap after a miscalculation in irrigation combined with an unexpected overnight rain. The machine looked powerful, indestructible, but it wasn't moving, not even an inch. A group of engineers surrounded it, their clean boots now stained with dark soil. They moved with urgency, tapping on tablets, scanning data, running diagnostics. Their voices overlapped in a mixture of confidence and confusion. Engine output is normal. Hydraulic pressure is stable. No system errors detected. One of them crouched near the wheel, pressing his gloved hand into the mud. It sank deeper than expected. That's the problem right there, he said. Ground saturation is way above threshold. The farm owner, Daniel Reeves, stood nearby with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His face carried the weight of years of hard work, and the growing pressure of loss. "How bad is it?" he asked. The lead engineer, a tall man named Carter Hayes, stood up and exhaled slowly before answering. "Worst case," he said, "we could be looking at structural stress if we keep forcing it. Best case, it stays stuck until the ground dries." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And how long will that take?" Carter hesitated. "A few days, maybe more." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "A few days," he repeated. "Do you know what a few days means during harvest?" No one answered, because they all knew. It meant lost crops, lost money, lost time that could never be recovered. The golden wheat surrounding the field swayed gently in the breeze, ready to be harvested. Perfect, valuable, and completely out of reach. The first attempt. "Hook it again," Carter ordered. Two large modern tractors rumbled nearby, their engines roaring to life. These weren't ordinary machines. They were built for power, designed to pull, lift, and conquer terrain that older equipment never could. Chains were brought out, thick, industrial-grade steel, heavy enough to drag across the dirt with a metallic scrape. The workers moved quickly, securing the chains to the combine's reinforced towing points. "Everything tight," Carter called out. "Secure. Let's try a gradual pull this time. No sudden force." The tractors aligned themselves, engines growling louder as they prepared. Daniel stepped back, watching closely. This had to work. It had to. "Go," Carter signaled. The tractors began pulling. At first, nothing happened. Then the chains tightened, stretching with tension. The engines roared louder, pushing more power into the effort. The ground trembled slightly under the force. The combine didn't move. "More power," someone shouted. The tractors pushed harder. Their wheels began to spin, throwing mud in all directions. Thick clumps splattered across boots, machines, and the air itself. Still nothing. The combine stood there, unmoved, like it had rooted itself into the earth. Then, snap, one of the chains broke violently, whipping backward with a sharp crack that echoed across the field. Everyone jumped back. "Shut it down," Carter yelled. The engines died, leaving behind a heavy silence. A worker muttered under his breath, "That chain was rated for double this load." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling over. "You said this would work." Carter looked, equally frustrated, but he kept his voice controlled. "It should have." The analysis. Minutes later, the engineers regrouped near the combine. Tablets were back out. Numbers, graphs, and models filled the screens. Carter spoke while pointing at the data. "The issue isn't the machine. It's the ground resistance combined with suction force." One younger engineer frowned. "Suction force?" "Yes," Carter replied. "The mud isn't just holding the tires, it's pulling them down. Like a vacuum." He zoomed in on a diagram. "The deeper the wheels sink, the stronger that force becomes. We're not just pulling weight, we're fighting the ground itself." Daniel looked at the stuck machine again. "So what are you saying?" Carter hesitated before answering. "I'm saying, brute force isn't enough." The second attempt. But they tried again anyway. Because that's what they knew. More equipment was brought in. Additional support vehicles. Stronger chains. This time, they adjusted angles, trying to pull from a slightly different direction. On my mark, Carter said. The engines roared louder than before. Go. The pull began again. Chains tightened. Mud churned. Engines screamed under pressure. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the combine might move. A slight shift. A tiny tremor. Hope flickered. Keep going, Daniel shouted. But then the wheels sank deeper. The mud swallowed more of the tires. The machine tilted slightly, making the situation worse. Stop, stop, Carter yelled. Everything shut down again. Silence. Even heavier this time. One of the workers kicked the ground in frustration. This thing's not coming out. Doubt begins. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Time was slipping away. Daniel stood alone for a moment, staring at the combine. That machine represented years of investment, progress, efficiency, and now it was useless. One of the younger engineers approached Carter quietly. Maybe we need external heavy equipment, he suggested. Like a crane or industrial puller. Carter shook his head. By the time we bring that in, the field will be destroyed. And even then, no guarantee. The engineer looked back at the combine. So what do we do? Carter didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, he didn't know. The crowd gathers. Word spread quickly. Nearby farmhands, workers, and even a few neighbors began to gather at a distance, watching the scene unfold. Some whispered. Some shook their heads. Others just stared silently. A young farmhand spoke quietly to another. Crazy, isn't it? What? All that technology, and it's stuck like an old cart. The other nodded. Sometimes new doesn't mean better. The feeling of failure. Carter walked slowly around the combine, studying it again. Everything about it was perfect. The design, the engineering, the power, and yet, it had failed. Or maybe, they had failed. He looked down at the ground, pressing his boot into the mud. It sank slightly. He frowned. Something about this didn't feel right. But before he could think further, a faint sound reached the edge of the field. Soft, rhythmic, unfamiliar. Chug, chug, chug. At first, no one paid attention. But the sound grew louder, steadier, different from the sharp roar of modern engines. Heads began to turn. What is that? Someone asked. The sound continued. Chug, chug, chug. Slow, patient, unhurried. Carter looked toward the dirt road leading to the field. A shape appeared in the distance. Small at first, then clearer, then unmistakable. An old steam engine tractor rolled into view, its metal body worn but strong, its tall smokestack releasing gentle clouds of steam into the evening air. The crowd grew quiet. The engineers exchanged confused looks. That can't be serious, one of them said under his breath. But the machine kept coming. Chug, chug, chug. And with it, an old man, sitting calmly at the controls, as if he had all the time in the world. The old steam engine rolled into the field with a steady, deliberate rhythm, its iron wheels crunching against the muddy terrain. Unlike the modern tractors that had tried and failed, it did not roar. It did not growl. Its power was quiet, contained, deliberate. The smoke rising from its tall chimney was soft, curling gently into the fading orange sky. It was a different era of machinery, older, slower, but somehow, alive. The engineers watched, skeptical. Carter Hayes stepped forward, adjusting his safety vest as if to remind himself that this was still a professional, modern operation. Sir, he called out, his voice carrying over the gentle hiss of steam, I think you've made a mistake coming here. That engine, it's outdated. The combine, outdated. The old man interrupted, his voice calm, almost soft. He had the kind of authority that didn't need volume. He looked at the engineers, then at the massive combine trapped in the mud, then back at the field. Physics hasn't changed. The laws of traction haven't changed. The problem isn't the machine. It's how you approach it. The farm owner, Daniel Reeves, felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. So, what do we do? The old man didn't answer immediately. He climbed down from the steam engine and walked to the front of the combine. His boots sank slightly into the mud, but not enough to slow him. He crouched, running a hand along the tires, feeling the tension, the weight, the suction of the soil gripping them. He tapped the ground gently, almost meditatively, before rising again. "You see," he said finally, "these machines are powerful. But power alone doesn't solve everything. This ground, it doesn't yield to force. It yields to understanding." Carter Hayes blinked. "Understanding, sir? With all due respect, that's not really quantifiable." The old man gave a faint smile. "Quantifiable isn't always helpful. Experience is." Preparing the pole, he returned to his steam engine with a calm precision. From a small compartment, he produced heavy chains, not brand new, not shiny, but perfectly maintained. He attached one end to the reinforced towing points of the combine, the other end to his engine's front frame. The chains were thick, industrial, and had clearly been used for decades. Instead of rushing, he paused. He looked at the horizon, then at the angle of the combine, then at the slope of the field. His eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. Not in numbers on a screen, but in muscle memory, instinct, and decades of habit. The engineers whispered among themselves. "He's just thinking," one muttered. "Does he even know what he's doing?" Daniel Reeves watched, heart pounding. Could this really work? Could a machine built over a century ago, slow, cumbersome, forgotten, actually pull free the latest technology in agricultural engineering? The old man climbed onto his engine again. He pulled the throttle slowly. The steam engine exhaled a deep, steady hiss and began to move forward, wheels churning the muddy soil with calculated patience. Chug, chug, chug. It wasn't a violent motion. It wasn't a surge. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, a cadence that seemed to communicate with the ground itself. The first inch. At first, nothing happened. The combine remained stubbornly in place. The chains stretched taut. The engineers shifted uneasily. Carter frowned, brushing mud off his boots. This isn't going to work. But the old man simply adjusted the engine's angle, nudged the wheel slightly to the left, and applied a fraction more steam pressure. Chug, chug, chug. Slowly, so slowly that it was almost imperceptible, the combine trembled. A tire shifted, just a fraction. The mud released its iron grip ever so slightly. Then, with a soft groan of metal and rubber, the combine moved an inch. Daniel's eyes widened. "Did you see that?" "Yes," one of the engineers said, voice tinged with disbelief. The old man didn't celebrate. He didn't rush. He simply continued, moving with the same steady rhythm he had practiced every day for decades. The dance of patience. What followed wasn't brute force, it was choreography. The old man increased the engine's pressure just enough to encourage movement, then eased it back to prevent the tires from spinning. He shifted slightly left, then right. He rocked the engine gently, allowing the chains to maintain tension without snapping. Every motion was deliberate. Every adjustment was learned through years of repetition, trial, and error. Every decision relied on habit. The combine responded. An inch became 2 inches. 2 inches became 3. The engineers leaned forward, their hands gripping the edges of their tablets. They could see it happening, but it defied logic. Software calculations, torque equations, hydraulic force, they had all failed. And yet, here it was, movement. Steady, unstoppable, inexorable. The crowd of farmhands at the edge of the field whispered in awe. "It's moving. It's actually moving." Daniel Reeves felt a lump in his throat. All those sleepless nights, worrying about lost crops and lost money, were beginning to dissolve in disbelief and relief. The young engineer who had doubted the old man before muttered, "It shouldn't work, and yet it is." Understanding the ground. The secret wasn't just the old engine. It wasn't just the chains. It wasn't just patience. It was knowledge ingrained into habit. The old man understood the ground. He knew the suction force of wet Kansas soil, the way mud grips and holds depending on temperature and moisture. He had worked fields that sank under rainfall, fields baked dry by the sun, fields that seemed impossible. Over decades, he had developed an intuition, a muscle memory of judgment that no algorithm could replicate. With each careful adjustment, the combine responded. The ground released gradually, obeying the rhythm rather than resisting it. The chain flexed. The engine groaned, but not in pain, more like conversation. Every inch forward was a dialogue between man, machine, and earth. The breakthrough. After what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, the combine began to slide free in earnest. The tension in the chains increased, then decreased, then increased again. Mud flew, tires spun slightly, but there was control in chaos. And then, with one final steady pull, the combine emerged from the trap entirely. The crowd erupted in gasps and applause. Daniel Reeves ran forward, nearly tripping over the churned mud. You did it," he shouted. The engineers stared, mouths open, unable to reconcile their calculations with reality. Carter finally spoke, voice low and almost reverent. How did you know?" The old man climbed down from his engine, wiping soot and sweat from his hands. His eyes twinkled faintly. "You rely on what your machines can do," he said slowly. "I rely on what I've learned to do, through habit, through practice, through decades of repetition. I don't fight the ground. I move with it." He looked at the combine, then at the tractors that had failed so spectacularly. "You try to solve problems with power. Power isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. Habit completes it. Experience completes it." The moral realized. Daniel shook the old man's hand, gratitude shining on his face. "I don't know how to thank you." The old man gave a soft smile. "Keep learning. Keep practicing. The moment you stop building habits, the machines, and the world, will teach you lessons the hard way." Carter Hayes, still staring at the combine, finally nodded slowly. "I get it. Experience, patience, habits. You didn't pull it with strength. You pulled it with mastery." The old man climbed back onto his steam engine and gave it one last steady puff of steam. Chug, chug, chug. The sound faded into the distance as he drove slowly away, leaving behind a freed combine, a stunned group of engineers, and a field that would be harvested on time. The takeaway: no screen, no software, no modern calculation could replace habit formed over decades. The old man's mastery wasn't in speed or brute power, it was in rhythm, patience, and understanding cultivated through repetition. The harvest was saved, not by machines alone, but by the quiet, unglamorous power of habit.